Hi guys! It has been a while since I showed you a little bit of editing, and since today it's a grim day, the weather sucks, so it's kind of nice just to sit inside and look at old photos and edit. My tools of choice to edit is Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop. Lightroom I use always. Photoshop I use sometimes. If I can get away with it, I only use Lightroom. And very often I just do, like, for example, when I'm on the road and traveling, I just want to showcase some of the stuff I'm doing at that moment. I'm not one of those guys that necessarily only post my very best stuff. I usually post stuff from what I'm doing at each time. So, and very often I just don't have really a lot of time to edit, so I like to fast edit. And very often I re-edit those photos. I see what I like, I see what people like, I see what people might buy, so I re-edit them and make them really nice. But just to post on Facebook or Instagram or social media, you don't have to do that much. So now I'm gonna show you how I edit, like, just, majority of my photos. So let's start with this photo here. This is from the highland of Iceland, a crater named Ljótipollur. And very often this is what you see when you open a photo from camera. Very high dynamic range, the sky kind of looks blown out, and this is way too dark, and this happens very often when you have high dynamic range. Sometimes when you take like a cell photo of this, it looks nice, and that's because the cell phone edits the photo a lot before it takes it, and it edits it a lot before it displays on the screen. And that's why I always feel like it's kind of funny when people are shooting a selfie, and they think they're so pretty, so they post it online with the headline "No Filter Thursday," and well, there's a lot going on under the hood. But here, this is a raw photo. That's why it kind of looks crappy. The sky is way too bright, the ground is way too dark, but I can see here on my histogram, it is stretching, but it's not touching. It's not blowing out the sky or the ground. So how do I double check that? I just do the exposure. I just lower the exposure, and I can see I have details in all the clouds, and the clouds actually look quite cool. And I push up the exposure a little bit, and I can see like I have everything, and it's not noisy or anything like this. It's shot at ISO 100, so this should be quite good. So first of all, let me just start by doing a little bit for the ground. I'm gonna raise the exposure here a little bit, open up the shadows, something like that. Now at least I have a good, I can see the colors, I can see what's happening here on the ground, but the sky is even worse now. So what I'm gonna do with that, I'm gonna add a gradient filter. There is, like, you can do like a gradient filter on camera. I used to use it a lot, but nowadays I use it if I have to. The thing is, if you look at the histogram on your camera when you shoot, and you're definitely blowing out your highlights. The histogram is just like, let's see. You can see clearly that the histogram is touching and it's blowing the highlight, like it's doing now. After I edited the photo, now it's blowing the highlights. So if you see that on the camera when you shoot, try to fix it before. If you can't, you can put a gradient filter in front of the camera to darken the sky. And or you could bracket the shot. You know, people have their own preferences. But if I'm within bounds, if I'm not touching either side of the histogram, I don't do filters or anything like that. I don't like to add a glass in front of my very good lens, you know, because it's always gonna suffer, you know, the quality is always gonna suffer. And also when I put down a gradient filter, here it's kind of easy because it's, you know, it's not completely straight, but if I put down a gradient filter, I'm gonna darken the sky and also the top of this crater, and I don't want that. So now I want to do, well, like I have a gradient filter on it. I'm gonna take down the exposure, the highlights a little bit, and a little more down, like this. Maybe I will add a little dehaze. Be careful with dehaze. It looks very cool until suddenly it just completely looks like shit. Clarity, I rarely use clarity in my photos, and if I use it, I'm only using it very locally, not globally on all the photo, because it just looks bad. You know, you kind of have to feel like the photo pops a little bit on your screen. But if you print the photo, for example, it's going to look terrible, and if you overdo clarity. And also what clarity does, it desaturates the photo, and that's not that. But back to this, I'm seeing now that the sky actually looks great now, but like with a glass filter in front of the camera, I'm affecting the top of the crater also. This is very easy to fix in Lightroom. So I can see here my range mask is off, which kind of just means that it's just like it is. It's just a curtain mask down, and it affects the top of my mountains. But it's luminance. I want luminance mask, which means basically that you are affecting areas based on the luminosity. And there's very different luminosity in the sky and in the crater. So I'm gonna tell the luminosity mask here to take away the dark areas from the light areas. So I do this by selecting luminance here in range mask. I like to see luminous mask when I do it like this, and if I drag down this top slide, I'm affecting the highlights. No, and that's not what I want. I want it to be shown on the highlights, not on the shadow. So I'm leaving that alone. So I'm dragging up the shadows. Look, see how the mask is fading away from the shadow. And I like to do it maybe, you know, there's no like a rule to it. You just take off the show luminous mask and see how you're doing, because I don't want halos. So I might do a little bit too much, like this. Now it's just perfect. There's no halo. There's no. It's not affecting the top of the mountains or anything. I can see, however, when I zoom in like this, I can see like there's a green line here at the top of these mountains. That's very easy to fix. It is called chromatic aberration. It very often shows in high contrasty area. It's either green line or like magenta line. No, it's very easy to fix. 95% of the time, I just check this, and now the green line is gone. Check, remove chromatic aberration. And this is, I usually do this also. What it does, it's especially when I have like a wide angle lens, you can see some vignetting in the corners. This removes that vignetting and it distorts, and it tries to fix if there's any distortion. The wider the lens, the more the vignetting and the distortion. Zoom lens, maybe you would see very little different if you do it there. All right, so now I have a good base, a good foundation. And now I would just like, let's see, I'm gonna do like, I want more contrast. I'm not very keen on using this contrast here. You know, it kind of chokes it too much, and there are other ways to deal with contrast. This is one of my favorites, like that. I pull it up. If you can hear my cat is meowing and my dog is whining, and I don't know what the fuck is wrong with them. I'm such a bad father. But anyway, so now it's kind of balanced. It's nice. Maybe I would go back to the curtain. Just click it. There's a point here. I click it, and maybe I would like to darken it a little bit more. Somewhat. Something like that. So now it's basically just, I would like the overall photo to be a little darker, like that. And maybe now I want to, in some areas I would like maybe to lighten up a little bit of the crater. Then I could use the brush tool and open up the exposure a little bit. And this is too much, but this is how I like to do it. I like to do a little bit too much, because then I see what I'm doing, and then I dial it back. Okay. Now I don't want this to bleed on the water or on the sky, so I do range mask luminosity again. I show luminosity mask, and you can see it's bleeding a little bit. Now I would like to affect the highlight, because I don't want it on my highlights. Something like that. And then I can like maybe put this, add a little whites to it, maybe a little more. Like that. And then maybe a little bit in the water, because in some areas the water looks a little bit. I would like to darken that a little bit. Something like that. And again I do the range mask, and you see it's bleeding up on the hill. And I'll take it away from it. Should look good. Should look good now. Yeah. So everything is local. Very few global adjustments. And I don't want to do something to everything. I just want to pick an area and edit that. This is really fast. This would take me maybe 2 minutes to do. And after I get a little more contrast here with my escrow thingy, and yeah, I'm gonna make this do with this photo. I'm gonna do another one. Okay, here I want this a little bit darker. This area, this light area here. I want it a little bit more punchy. I want more yellow, and I want a little lighter. The river, I want that a little lighter, and a little more dominant. I want to see more, because I really like the speed of the river. It shows definitions, and it's kind of cool. So what do? Well, maybe let's start by this. Let's start by lighting this up a little bit. Like that, something. And well, I told you before, I don't use a lot of clarity, but to add definitions in water, clarity is very good. It works very well. Sometimes I do it because this is like the whole area. Sometimes I just do it with a brush, just in small areas where I think it's needed. So like this somewhat, maybe I would make this a little more bluish. This is maybe a little bit too much, but let's see how it goes. We can always come back to it. So now I would maybe like to put a radiant filter here, like this, and I darken it a little bit. I increase a little bit the yellow side of the white balance, warm it up a little bit. It looks better like that. So I very often I try to get like warm and cold. Warm and cold in an image usually looks very good. Something like that. Let's see. Well, if I do a little clarity here, you can see like the light rays. It kind of gets more defined, but not too much. I kind of like it soft. So somewhere here in the middle. Something like that. There we go. And overall, I think we could use a little more yellow. That's why I kind of knew that I would add warmth to the photo. That's why I kind of overdid the coldness of the river, because I knew it would, kind of dial back. But again, I can always go back to that, like here. If I feel like it's too much or too little, I can always add to it here. Something like that. Thing is with lens, the profile correction, the lens corrections, I kind of like to have that on here because, and also I think I see a little bit of a diffraction, a chromatic aberration line. If you put it, if you check it, and there is nothing to fix, nothing really happens. But if there is some line somewhere, and this will always fix it. So very often I just check it. I just put it there, and then I see. And also now maybe I would like to add the contrast a little bit in this one. The same way with the curve, not with the contrast slider, and maybe I would raise the black point a little bit to give the shadows a little like this washed out look, something like that. And there is this is kind of just this spot here. It was like this, and there's also like these light rays, like this flares, because I'm shooting against the sun, so sometimes it flares. And I kind of like the flare, but it's very easy it shouldn't be a problem just to pick this tool here, the spot removal tool, and just remove the flares if you don't want them, like that. If something gets too complicated for the spot removal tool in Lightroom, then you might have to go in Photoshop and stamp it out or use those tools there. They are much more powerful than the spot removal tool. But for stuff like this and dusts and stuff, that comes from the lens, this is a perfect tool to do this. Oh, here you can see the before and after on this photo. It's much more punchy and nice. It might be a tad too blue in the river, but that's kind of just a personal preferences. And the other one. Yeah, that's it look quite a bit better than it did before, with very simple, very easy to use tools in Lightroom. I would probably look at the photo first and decide what to do. I just don't open up a photo and just start messing around with the sliders. I know what I want, so I look at the photo. The sky is blown out. This is here, and maybe a little saturation in this area. I know what I want, and these tools are very effective, very, very, and especially this is relatively new. The range mask tool that can luminosity mask those curtains or those gradient filters out in Lightroom. Big help. I think it was in the last or the previous update in Lightroom. They added this, and it's amazing. So I hope this helps in your fast editing. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.